Hello. Good morning. Hope everyone is well. Hi guys. Hopefully we can. Jet, hi. There you are.
LeAnn Rhymes Cibrian.
Yes. Good morning.
It's good to connect with you today.
You too. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm. I. I just actually DM'd Jeff before this, and I was telling him that I'm feeling a bit heavy today, and have been for the last probably 3 days. As we're going to sit here and talk about embodied spirituality, I think it's kind of a great place to begin. I know so many people are right now, just the emotions are, it's like a wave we're riding.
Yeah.
I can be, I'm sure as everyone understands, I can be so happy and joyful 1 minute, and then the next minute I'm just in grief and sadness and
Yeah.
anger and like all the things. And you know, I'm reading Grounded Spirituality right now, and it's really amazing. The more I read it, the more I realize I don't know shit. I mean, I think I've known that. The more I dig into spirituality, the more I realize, I feel like I don't. What I thought I knew all of a sudden gets turned upside down, and I think that's kind of the beautiful piece and the beautiful part of this journey of you know I mean to start off, like what is embodied spirituality to you in your words?
Well, I mean, I think that, I define spirituality as reality.
Mm,
So the person who's, I guess, the most spiritual, if we could quantify it, is the one who's holding the greatest number of threads of reality in their consciousness moment to moment.
okay.
And I don't believe you can hold the greatest number of threads of reality in your consciousness if you're not living an embodied life.
Hmm.
Because you can be a head tripper, and I'm a very expert head tripper. So I'm
Yeah.
holding threads of consciousness on one level, and on another, the others are repressed, or I'm fragmented, or I'm disconnected from them. I learned this in my work in bioenergetics and other places, that the deeper I went into the body, the deeper that I excavated what was held in the caverns of feeling through the
Hmm.
deepening of the breath and the opening of the body, the more access I had to all the different realms of experience that I wasn't aware of in my moment to moment experience. In my habitual range of emotion was very tight. So,
Hmm.
and in a way, this exploration took me into the question of, like, what is spirituality? I started with somatic psychotherapy. It was like, because I would access something we might call unity consciousness only ever through the releasing of the emotional debris that was held somatically. So
Hmm.
I could sit in a meditation cushion with Jack Kornfield for 50 years and never get anywhere. And I could do a 3 hour holotropic breath work with Stan Groff, and at the end of it feel like I was naturally meditative. I was here
Right.
because my energy came back down into my body. And, and then I went on a whole journey of trying to figure out what is this thing they're calling spirituality,
Hmm.
because I had had this experience of spirituality through the body itself. I have a quote. I thought I would start, just wanted to grab a quote that I
Yes,
thought
please.
might reflect our conversation and
Hmm.
you. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I think you might have read this one. It's not in Grounded Spirituality. Okay, quote. It's not about letting it go. It's about letting it in. It's about letting it deep. It's about letting it through. It's about being true to your feelings. It's about giving your experiences the attention they deserve. And that may take a moment, or it may take years. The trick is not to shame your need to hold on to what has yet to be resolved. Let it go is often the mantra of the self-avoidant, feigning resolution because they lack the courage or the preparedness to face their feelings. Let's not play that game. Let's let things in and through until they are fully and truly ready to shift. Let's let it grow into the transformation at its heart. We write our story by fully living it, not by letting it go before it's time. Close
Mm.
quote. So for me, you can't let it through if you're not letting it through your body.
Yeah, I mean that is, man, so my journey with my body has been really interesting. I grew up with psoriasis severely from the time I was 2 years old. So instantly, like, I cut off my body. It was too painful.
Uh-huh.
I've always lived in my head, and coming back down into it um, is it's challenging, and it's a daily practice. And I can, for the last 7 years, I've pretty much been practicing breath work. And breathwork was the first real practice that allowed me to access these different states of consciousness, as you were, describing it, where, and it's interesting because I haven't been doing breathwork as much, and I just started getting back into it. And there is a difference when you express, allow things to move, and then you can access a different space. But before that, there's just so much, to me, it feels like hardening.
Hmm.
And I mean, I can feel it in my body, I can feel the tension. And I know there's so much that I've worked through up here, but I have yet to work through it here. And so it's still, no matter how much I can conceptualize and intellectualize, everything that I've worked through, until you really get into what is in the body. You're correct about that. I mean, I've known it from my own experience. It doesn't quite connect. You're still living outside of yourself in some way. Um, and, I think so many of us have been taught that our body, there's so much shame around our body, our sexuality, especially through, I mean, I grew up, Southern Baptist, and there was, I don't know, there's just, from a very early age, so many of us are taught that, the original sin, and like so much of us is wrong. And so why would we want to embody that?
Absolutely.
Um, and, I'm finding, like I said, this roller coaster of emotion, all of a sudden I feel this heaviness, and I'm like, whew, I don't even think this is I don't think this is of the day. It feels like ancient stuff coming up in me that I have yet to process. And I feel like there's a really, I don't know, it seems like there's just so much that can all of a sudden swell up when we start doing this work. And
Yep.
it's like it can almost it takes over your life in a lot of ways. I know there's
Right.
probably a lot of people out there going, we have kids, we don't have time for this. Like,
Yeah,
we
they
don't have
don't.
time for this journey. And that's what I mean. For so long, for me, I've worked my whole life, worked my way out of my body. I was always kept busy, and now here we are sitting in the spaciousness. And when things like this arise, I'm like, I have a full day ahead of me. Like, I've got stuff to do. Like, I have no time for this. I mean, how do you navigate that? How do we navigate the real world on our everyday life and existence and needs, um, and having to take care of our own lives along with this healing process? Like, how does that go hand in hand?
Well, I think for a lot of people, it's almost impossible. Their economic realities don't allow any space anywhere for them to be able to engage in this kind of a process. I guess I never thought that I'd grown up privileged because my circumstances were so difficult,
Mhm.
felt so difficult. But now I understand there was still a measure. I grew up in Canada, so that was already a little privileged and
Mhm.
beneficial.
I love Canadians. Canadians are the
Yeah,
best.
Canadians, we rock
I love
in
you guys.
Canada. Absolutely. Let's hear it for Tim Hortons.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think that it's different. I think that I like to stay realistic and not sort of, paint a picture of possibility that worked for me but doesn't work for everybody. But if there's possible to create space for emotional process and emotional release in your life, I think that's one of the first and most important steps. And I think that's difficult because, as you said, we were shamed from the beginning. We were shunned from the beginning. We were sinners from the beginning. This is how patriarchy controlled us religiously and spiritually. The spiritualists, the patriarchal spiritualists keep us head tripping, keep us inside of the mind, blame the monkey mind because they don't want to go down into the monkey heart and the unresolved caverns, right? It's a perfect game. Boys play this game all the time. They don't want to deal with their feelings. It's simple, right?
Right.
And then they paint a beautiful, brilliant picture of lineage and spiritual wisdom and enlightenment and awakening and disconnecting and sitting in the cave and meditating for 30 years to bring good vibrations to the village. It's all utterly preposterous in my view. And it's a big scam, but, and we're not allowed to talk about spirituality or critically review it. We can
Right.
stand down religiousness, but we can't stand down. And so if I do it, they say, why are you critically reviewing spirituality, as though it's exempt from conversation? So there's so much of that we don't feel permission to feel our feelings. Nobody taught us how to feel our feelings. I mean, I was driving the other day, LeAnn, down the highway, and I was looking around at everybody. I was just thinking, my God, it's like we learned geography and history and mathematics, all these things. But the most basic and important thing, what to do with our feelings and how to authentically relate to another human being, nobody taught us.
No.
So, right. So I think we're at the beginning. It seems crazy after thousands of years of humanity, but I feel like we're at the beginning of this journey of authenticity to figure out what on earth is going on inside of us. So a good place to start is with somatic psychotherapy. If you can access it, even watch YouTube videos of somatic experiencing and bioenergetics, and begin to spend some time learning what's inside of the body and how to move what's inside of the body. Because this accumulated debris is precisely why we can't figure out what our sacred purpose is precisely why we act out in our lives, is precisely why we get depressed. Depression for me is frozen feeling often. We need to thaw out the feeling, break down the armor, shed the armor in order to access what's living inside us. My simplest experience was when I went first to work with LeAnn in bioenergetics. He was the co-founder in Connecticut. He put me over a breathing stool. It's like a pommel horse that you go backwards over. And he kept pushing me to breathe boy, like this. And I'm like, oh, I can't breathe. Because I had so unconsciously tightened my lungs and my chest area so much because I didn't want to access. I wanted to shallow breathe because shallow breath meant shallow access to feelings. Deep breath meant deeper access to feelings. But he knew that. So he kept pushing me. And eventually he said, cry. He goes, sob. He'd do this phony sobbing thing. So it was like fake it till you make it. And then I started to sob. And in the heart of it, I started to feel nauseous, and I started to access all these feelings and memories that I had no idea I was holding. In my habitual range of emotion, my surviving by my wits lifestyle, my focused Jewish warrior lawyer, I had no idea, no clue what was in my bones. So that's where I began to learn that who we think we are isn't who we think we are, because we're carrying so much debris up the hill. And until we can access it, excavate it, release it, and get through to the clarified other side, it's hard to know who we are. It's hard to know how we feel about anything. And it's hard to get the energy that we need to manifest our dreams.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. I just had this experience the other day with, I've been doing some somatic work for a while now. And anger, I grew up in a household where, and this is nothing against my parents at all. This is just facts. And my dad was incredibly angry and my mom was very sad. And so those two emotions I repressed one of them. And then basically I've never been in touch with my anger. It's been something I've suppressed my whole life, and it just comes up as sadness. So if I get angry, it comes out as tears, because that's the more acceptable emotion, right? Sadness, especially for women in the world.
Yep.
Like, we can be sad and you guys get that, but then, anger, like, God knows what to do with that.
And we can be angry, but we can't cry. But
right, exactly. Right. It's completely opposite. Right. And so my mom texted me something the other day that was so triggering, and I got so angry. And it's really the first time I've ever truly allowed my own self without it being in a therapy kind of situation, where I just allowed my own self to take myself upstairs and scream. And I just looked at my husband and I go, I'm so angry right now. I have to go upstairs. I have to let this out. And I just screamed, and that scream turned into a 30-minute bawling session. And I couldn't stop crying, And in the midst of it all, I was thinking, oh my God, this is the thing. This is like the thing that I've been wanting to do. Like, I asked a friend of mine not long ago, I was like, how do I access that grief that I know is there, but it's so deep and it's so old that I don't know how to access that just yet. I've accessed pieces of it, but it's just, I can tell it's ready. I just don't know how to access it. And it was funny that my mom's text that triggered me like brought me there, and it brought me back to like when I was 11 years old. And I remember thinking as I'm just bawling, like, oh, this is how I felt back then. This is my little self, like wanting to, this is it. This is the letting it out. This is the somatic experience that I need. And after that, the spaciousness. My husband came and picked me up off the floor um and walked me outside, and I felt like I had just released something that had been, I mean, a small piece of what is still there to be accessed through the body. But it was just this incredible experience and such a beautiful experience. I was so grateful after that for the anger, for something that triggered that piece to just be released. And then I felt very heavy for the next day. I mean, I think it's interesting you talk about authenticity and being able to process these things and showing up like I DM'd you and being able to say, hey, I'm in this space right now. I think our authenticity and being able to verbalize how we are feeling in the moment to the best of our ability is so important and so key, because it allows us to, for me at least, it's allowed me to not have to just, okay, here's my hour that or here's my 45 minutes I'm gonna give myself to feel, and then the rest of the day I'm supposed to pretend like
Right.
that didn't happen
Adapt.
and
Right.
go on about my life. I mean, I've done it for so long. I mean, I had to go on stage all the time feeling like absolute crap and then just put a smile on,
Yeah.
So I think I think what we're really creating in this world right now is this beautiful authenticity with one another to be able to work through some of these things and show up still however we are. Because I think when we show up for another human being in our authenticity, however we are in that moment, there's a beautiful gift that is being given both to ourselves and to the other. And such an opportunity to give other people permission. I mean, I think within each
Right.
other, we're finding permission to show up as we are, and in that lies a beautiful embodiment of spirituality, of loving the other.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the key is authenticity has to include everything. What I
Hmm.
would call enrealment. We can call it whatever we want, but I feel as though the anger piece is very important, because I feel like we're at this beginning of this giant bridge crossing from survivalism as our orienting principle, defining who we are by how we adapt, how we disguise, how we put food on the table. So you go out, you're a famous singer, you put a smile on your face, you make the money, you make people happy, and whatever their God-jectifying projection onto you is, or whatever that is, and then you get off the stage and you go, God, not this again. So I think it's important as we cross the bridge to authenticity, that is not defining who we are just by what puts food on the table, but
Hmm.
by defining who we are by who we really are and why we're really here and what we're really here to do and what our offerings are in this lifetime, which is, I think, what you're leaning into right now.
Hmm.
We're at the beginning of that. And I think the only way we're going to make that crossing is if we are allowed access to all of the range of feeling. For me, presence is a whole being experience. So we have to access all of it. And that includes anger. And anger has been so vilified culturally, and for good reasons, but we haven't made healthy distinctions between unhealthy and healthy anger, or unhealthy ego, healthy ego. It's all
Hmm.
very bifurcated, polarized in our understanding. And so I think it's like you're allowed to cry. I'm even allowed to cry. It's not seen as manly, but it's not seen as something scary and terrifying.
Hmm.
But I think we have justified anger at traumas we've endured, at unjust things that are happening in our world all the time. And we have to find a way to normalize the owning of our anger and
Hmm.
authentically relating it in a non-threatening way in order for us to actually get to the other side of that bridge, you know?
Yeah, interesting. You talk a lot about victimhood, which I find I've found some of your quotes about this really interesting, and owning our victimhood,
Yeah, sure.
and owning our traumas. And I truly, truly believe that uh, we do have to, we can't get through something until we actually own it, and
That we went
um,
through it.
yeah, and just accept that this is part of our story. Um, but then, you talk about owning victimhood at the same time, like how do we not how do we not get lost in victimhood,
Yeah.
so that we can utilize, it's almost like, utilizing the trauma, if we can, for um, for the enlightenment, or for our good, if there is a way to do that. I mean, I know
Yes.
for me, I like to find meaning. I try to find meaning in most things, and I do believe that there is a beautiful, almost puzzle that's being put together, and each piece is so important. Each conversation is so important. I don't know, for me, that's what I've felt in life, and when I look back, I can see how it all kind of beautifully fit together, and all of the things, even the traumas, um, were there was something in them that I was supposed to learn, or that I took from them. um, I mean, honestly, if I wouldn't have gone through everything I've been through, I couldn't be sitting here right now talking to you about this. I truly don't believe that. I mean, there's been, within my pain and within my suffering, even though it has been traumatizing, I have been able to extract something from it. So, yes, I own that I've been victimized, but at the same time, I feel like I don't want to get lost in that.
Great. Great. So I'm with you, but
Okay.
so, right. Okay. So for me, everybody's a trauma survivor to one
Hmm.
extent or another in this world. And the ones who deny that the most intensely are usually the most armored trauma survivors. And I just think that's where we're at a stage of human development where we haven't learned yet how to interface with humanity in a more authentic way that honors the vulnerability of the human experience, right? So I have no interest in getting inside of the honoring and acknowledgement of some way in which I've been traumatized and
Hmm.
staying stuck there for the rest of my days. But I'm also aware that we don't have techniques. People often can't afford therapeutic support. People often are interacting with survivalists who don't even know how to listen and hold the space for somebody else's experience, which alone can help them to heal and move beyond victimhood.
Hmm.
So at this stage of human development, I think when we push people, and there's a lot of cultural memeing around this, don't get trapped in your victimhood. I feel like in a way we're dishonoring the authentic experience of most of humanity. I think it's fine for us to co-create, and I talked about this at the back of Grounded, models that allow people to learn somatically, relationally, how to move through the material to the transformation at the other side, where there is. It's not for me to tell someone who's been raped and pillaged that there's absolutely has to be learning at the end of that. I don't
Right.
have the audacity to say that to
Right.
people,
Right.
because there are really big capital T traumas that's all.
Hmm.
It's just all they can do to survive and keep breathing and keep having faith in being alive. And so I want to be compassionately honor that.
Absolutely.
And, so for me, repressed emotions are unactualized spiritual lessons. So if I can activate and excavate that material,
Hmm.
and if I can find a way, whether it's with a system or a model, or a therapeutic dynamic, or people who really can hold the space for it to work through that material and somatically work through the material if it's really intense trauma,
Hmm.
then I will naturally arrive at a place where I've come to terms with or feel more peace with or have maybe learned a lesson from. It's not always a lesson in every trauma. I mean,
Right.
the idea that there's always a lesson is crazy, but sometimes there is. There certainly can be just some kind of a learning in terms of how we move forward. There can be gratitude. This can be all kinds of things.
Hmm.
All I really care about is that we get there authentically. So, when people talk about forgiveness, this insanity about forgiveness, it ends up for me being artificial or premature forgiveness. If you go through a truly organic, embodied process and you reach the other side feeling forgiving, wonderful.
Hmm.
I don't have a problem with that. But there's so much pressure on forgiveness religiously and spiritually. It's like it's a way of marketing product at this point that it worries me, because what we really need to do is show people how to work through the material,
Hmm.
right? And there's not a lot of
Totally.
that. There's not a lot of that. And most of spirituality is bypassy. So it's actually
Yep.
dissociating people. It's like, fine, I can sit in Vipassana all day long, but I'm not going to get anywhere near where I need to get in my emotional process like I am if I do some somatic psychotherapy as my spiritual practice. You know,
Right.
it becomes bypass enough. It becomes another marketing prop.
Yeah.
And that's not what I'm about. I'm really about people reaching a stage. You know, what I did with LeAnn, what I did in Holotropic, when I symbolically threw my mother off my back for 3 hours by throwing the assistants off of me at the Governor Dummer Academy in Massachusetts, I was resolving some piece of my puzzle. I spent years in therapy talking about my mother. I didn't get anywhere near where I got in 3 hours on that mat doing holotropic breath work.
Mm-hmm.
And I would sit with Jack Kornfield. It was an insight and opening workshop with Jack Kornfield and Tara Brock, and Stan Groff. And I would sit with Jack and look around at all these like really hyped up caffeinated Westerners that drove from New York and Boston for the workshop. And they're like agitated and annoyed and trying to sort of breathe and witness themselves and calm down. And I'm like, God, this is like, and I had been with LeAnn, so I knew there was another way to do it. So, and then I would, I just couldn't access the place. And then I do the 3 hours with Stan Groff, and afterwards I go outside and I feel completely connected to the bulrushes, naturally meditative, like I've actually healed and restored something rather than theoretically healed and restored something. So I don't want anyone trapped in victimhood, but we need a lot more teaching around real lived embodied models to get them through to the other side so they can feel freer, more liberated in their lives.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree with that. And I'm wondering, we talk about big T traumas, for so many people who have experienced big T traumas. One of my deepest fears was going into the pain and allowing it in, because I feel like it can be so overwhelming that you feel like you're going to get lost in it. And
Right.
that you're going to be there forever.
Yeah.
And some days I still feel like that. Some days it can just come rushing in and you're like, oh, this, when will I ever see the other side of this? For anybody out there who's afraid to begin this work or to dive deeper into this work, like, when it comes to diving into those deeper, traumas and emotions, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And do you have anything that maybe of comfort, to people that are thinking about diving into this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to understand that this is a lifelong journey, and nobody wants to hear that. I work with people. They say,
Agreed.
how long is this going to take, Jeff? I go, your whole life. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's levels and degrees of it. And the important thing is to move at the pace that your organism can handle and integrate. Mm-hmm. Integration of the process is almost as important as the process itself.
What is integration to you? What does that look like?
Well, it means like, so when I would go work with LeAnn, is a good example, it would take me a few weeks afterwards to reintegrate that experience, because he was inviting me very intensely, and bioenergetics is not for everybody at first. Often you need to start with talk therapy. Even when I would see him, I would need to talk first to feel safe and comfortable to go into the body. And he would engage me. He said, I know I need to engage your mind, so let's have a conversation, So I think, but then after I would get on the train back to Toronto from New Canaan, I felt like I was completely turned upside down in terms of my way of knowing reality, and my now deepening access to material that I didn't know before I walked in that room I was carrying. So it took me weeks to sort of reassemble myself and calm down enough, and for my nervous system to sort of reintegrate this new information and this new experience of Jeff. You just keep having a new experience of LeAnn. This is what happens. So if you rush from one, if you do that kind of Americana, fast moving intensity thing, overstimulation thing, you're not really going to transform. You're going to think you did, like you did at, a Tony Robbins weekend, and you come out of that thinking you're a new person, and 3 days later you're back to your old patterns, So if you're going to do deep work, you have to do it slowly, carefully. You have to work with a therapist, interface with therapists, interview them, make sure they really feel safe for you. Don't just take the first person you talk to. This is like the most important healing work you'll ever do. And allow yourself to have what I call solitude, which I'm getting a sense from, I was watching some of the things you were talking about, that this period is one of the first periods in your life where you finally had a chance to be alone.
Yeah.
you need to be alone because that's where imagination develops, of course.
Hmm.
But it's also an opportunity to not have to deal with other outside interactive triggers for some period of time, so you can tend to the wounds, so you can go back into your heart, and so you can allow yourself to reintegrate what's going to keep becoming a new way of being every time you go deeper.
Hmm.
um, and take your time with it. That's what I feel. And also find the right therapy. So bioenergetics worked for me because I was a really charged guy, energized. I think it would work for you because you have a lot
Hmm.
of energy like that. Somatic experiencing, Peter Levine's work is beautiful in helping a lot of people. It's a little too subtle and slow moving for me. It doesn't have that activation that I like.
You and I are the same way. I'm like, I
I
love
know.
it. It's great, but I'm like, okay, if I'm going in, I have 3 hours. Like, let's get in there. Let's get to the heart of it, you know. But yeah, I
Right.
mean, there's a lot of beautiful. There's beauty in somatic work. I mean, it's amazing. It's actually been. It really has been the first time, and I've probably done it for the last 6 months. It's been the first access point for me to really listen, like with to really listen to my body, um, and all the nuances. I mean, I think that that's, with my normal energy of just wanting to like dive in and excavate, it is very nuanced and it is slower. And but though I start to get to feeling things that I'd
Right.
never felt before.
That's major
um,
league, right? That's
yeah.
major.
And it takes time. I mean, that kind of work is, um it does take some time, and it takes patience and all the things that I don't normally have. So it's been triggering and challenging for me, but it's also been one of the most beautiful practices,
Right.
and therapies that I've worked with. So yeah, with the bioenergetics just sounds really interesting to me because it's kind of that other experience that I'm wanting to have,
Well,
with the
because
body.
core energetics and bioenergetics are similar. John Paracos broke away and formed core, but uses a lot of bio. I just want to say that it's a very good
Okay.
model also. But I think the reason why it's important is because Vipassana, I would say like level one, and then sort of some other gentler somatic models say level two for me. And then the stronger models say level three. And the difference for me is the stronger models give me access to stuff I can't access any other way.
Hmm.
So it's not that I have a problem with sitting peacefully, calmly in a meditative repose. It's that I feel like and being conscious of the breath. It's that I feel like what's missing is because there's not the intensification process. I don't even have access to all the threads and fragments of my consciousness because I can't get them without intensifying the breath and doing some of the biotechniques that actually open the parts of the body that are holding the repressed material.
Hmm.
That's the need. That's why the energized. But I want to say one of the.
Yeah.
I think it's also important with this developmental process to point out that it's not always about healing. It's like we spend a lot of time focusing on healing. And I spend a lot of time focusing on, but it's also just about developmental stages, right? So when I read a bit about your story, um, I get where the healing, I get where some of the healing wants to happen, but I
Hmm.
also get that as a young kid, pulled into the fame game so early in your life, and then never being alone, being moved around like a chess piece,
Hmm.
that this experience of childhood or the experience of solitude that many people had an opportunity to go through was an opportunity to develop other parts of the self that don't get developed when your whole life is spent with everybody glaring at you and having to live up to those standards. So it's about healing, but it's also about. So when I hear you talking somewhere about now you finally have some space for yourself or some, I think that feels almost as important to me as the healing process, because in the heart of that, you can begin to develop and encounter ways of being and ways of interfacing with the moment that you couldn't on that fame train. Does that feel
Hmm.
right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, that it is interesting. There's the word innocence has been really triggering me lately, and being to the very heart of, like, it hits my heart. And that's, I feel like there's so much. I feel like my heart is so innocent. I feel like we all are so innocent, and for me especially, it got ripped from me at a very young age. I didn't have a childhood, and I've gone my whole life with people going, "Oh, it's so horrible. I'm sad, sad for you that you didn't have a childhood." And I like, well, what? That was normal to me. What was that? Like, I didn't need a childhood. I just needed to focus on what I was doing, and I sang and I worked. And my stepsons are 17 and 13, and seeing them have a childhood and this wonderful father around them that like um, yet gives them the space to be kids and like truly loves them, and it's just a beautiful thing to watch. And I've realized like how different my life was, growing up. And not until recently has the innocence and even the innocence in some of I'll do interviews, and some of the things that can be taken out of interviews and twisted and whatever it may be. It's like I know I'm an open book, and that when someone asks me a question, it can just be, I speak my heart and I speak my truth, and like the innocence that can be twisted um, in this game that in this fame game, in my interesting world that I live in. Um, yeah, it can be heartbreaking. I think it's been heartbreaking for me more lately than
I would think.
ever. And I've been able to sit with that, during this time, and really give myself. I mean, I go out and I sit in the grass, and I remember when I was a kid, I used to go out and I was an only child. I'm an only child. I used to go out and just sit amongst the trees, and like I had imaginary friends, and like I find myself actually kind of doing that again. And this is the first time like ever um that I've gone out and just sat in the grass and like just looked at my
Right.
dog and like talked to my dog, and
Nice.
it's yeah, and it's been so beautiful. Honestly, that has been just sitting has been one of the most beautiful practices right now, that's just bringing me back to the moment and to myself, and not having to not having to breathe or meditate or whatever it may be. All of those
Yeah.
practices are wonderful, and they're definitely helping me too. But um, I think just sitting and being in nature right now has been really lovely, and is bringing me back to my innocence, and
Right. Right.
um, or just bringing my innocence to me for the first time, honestly. Because it definitely was lost.
Well, this is like a developmental stage. This is like,
Hmm.
how you bring all these threads of LeAnnness into play so that the holy weave starts to keep changing and transforming over time. I mean, you don't have to do this, any of this. You've reached a stage in public persona wise, the LeAnn Rhymes, that trip, whatever that is,
Right.
where you don't have to do this. What do you feel? I mean, is this an actualizing tendency? I mean, what is it inside of you that you think is prompting you to do this work and to bring this message to humanity? Because you don't have to do it.
Oh, wow. I do feel like it's part of my purpose. I do feel like it's part of my sacred purpose. Every time when I found more spaciousness within my body, when I've had those moments of joy, like just pour out of me, um, when I've gone from the deepest, darkest of places where I just thought like I'll never come out of this moment. And I've, through breath work or through many different modalities, through acceptance, I've any all the ways that I've learned to, or that I've grown through. I've always had the desire to help others with that, to bring my knowledge, and moment to moment knowledge, what I'm learning, to others, to hopefully help them heal in some way, or to find to help find their own, come back to their own heart, to help find their sacred purpose. Like, in what way can I be of service? I mean, honestly, that's just kind of where I'm at. I feel like I've always been of service with my music. I think for me it was a way to communicate my true heart, you know and to communicate my array of feelings that I couldn't necessarily put into words, and I could see how deeply I could penetrate another with raw emotion that came through here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as I'm, as I've learned and explored in my own humanity, Um, you know, it's interesting. I think starting so young, people didn't want my humanity. Most
No.
celebrities, they don't want your humanity. You know, they want this idea of you that is perfection, and it's so not it's so not sustainable. And um, my humanness is where I what I want to bring to the table now, to be able to connect with people in that way. I mean, you know, we talk about creating a new world and with an authenticity, and I think, you know, for me, someone in my that has my platform to show up in this way is
Amazing.
important. It's important, and it gives others, like I said, permission to do the same. And I think we're in a world where we are all needing to show up in our in all of in our wholeness, not just in our quote unquote perfection, but in our messiness and in our truth. And um, yeah, that it's just a strong heart pull, a real desire
Nice. That's
to
sacred purpose.
yeah, to just yeah, to melt down the walls. And
Yeah.
when I every time I share, like I heal. This is it's coming home to the real me, like to be able to share in this way.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
it's really important to me.
I was thinking about you yesterday, and I just told you I wasn't going to over prepare for our conversation.
Thank you.
But but once you open the door, there's so much of my writing is relates to things you're sharing and talking about. So there's so much alignment. But I feel like in a way, you've been playing catch up with your core self in a way,
Hmm.
and I feel like when you share, I mean, the beauty of the sharing. So when the famous, the projected perfect ones share their humanness, I feel like one of the most beautiful things about it is it tears down the projection, right?
Hmm.
Now, then people have to deal with how do they feel about you now that you're not the projection, right?
Right.
Maybe some of them go, I don't want to buy her music anymore because she's just a person just like me. Um, you know, um, but for a great, huge number of people who are ready to stop objectifying and to become re-empowered, you're actually handing the keys to their own empowerment. Every time we tear down the projection of perfection in somebody else, it comes back to us finally having to learn to stop looking for all of that outside of ourselves and start looking for it in the mirror.
Oh God, yeah. Well, that's the thing too. I mean,
That's it.
I know with, you know, with my platform, I can be incredibly triggering to a lot of people, you know, and that's, it's interesting when I do start talking about, you know, when I am showing up in my humanness and my wholeness. Yeah, there's a lot of people that I've been projected upon a lot.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you know, I going through an affair publicly and, you know, having so much anger and shame and all of that projected in my way. It was a man, have I I do have a ton of compassion and for others and for the pain of others um, and for myself. I mean, I've really I've gone through a lot and very publicly. Um,
Yeah.
and I
You've been
think,
publicly shamed.
yeah, oh God, yeah.
Absolutely. Which
um,
I see, LeAnn, a lot of it is just being really, that's about them saying, I'm so disappointed that you're not perfect because I really needed to find God somewhere and I just don't know. I wasn't trained to find God in the mirror. We're also shamed and shunned. So now you have an affair or you sue your father, whatever you do that's part of
right,
living a human life, suddenly they're disappointed because they can't project it onto you anymore, you know?
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's yeah, and that's I guess what I'm, you know, let's hold each other's hand and let's find it in the mirror together. Like, I
Nice.
mean, honestly, that's really what it is. Because
The portal
I'm,
is each other.
yeah, oh God, yes, you talk about, you know, how relationship
Yeah.
is so important, and I'm actually just really understanding that for the first time. You know, it's something relationships something I've easily wanted to run away from. Always, like, you know, I just want to shut it out. I don't want to deal with all of the complexities of it. And I'm finally coming to a space where those complexities are, oh God, like every time, you know, I share something with my husband or my friends, you know, that a new piece of me that I thought I couldn't share before, and have that accepted and have that witnessed. And it's just like the depth of that relationship becomes it's so much deeper and so much, it's just so beautiful. And the love that is accessed, the depth of love that can be accessed when we really show up in our fullness. And that's a journey for me right now, and one that, well, a lifelong one, but one that is just really starting to open, and I'm starting to experience, through relationship, a depth of love that I never been able to experience before. So,
Well, it kind of helps that you're manifesting a soul pod now,
yes,
probably
it does.
people around you that aren't wanting to exploit you or agenda you, but that
Mm.
are actually wanting to meet you eye to eye and heart to heart, and then you grow. And that's the key to the whole game.
Ah, there we are. Sorry, my phone just started going crazy.
Look at that. We
Yes.
disconnected, then we reconnected.
Connected. Yes. So yes, my soul pod. Yes. It is. Yes, I am starting to build those relationships, and it's quite beautiful. Meeting you, and just I've met so many people just through this work um, that are showing up for me, because I'm not, because I'm LeAnn Rimes, but just because I'm me, and it's wonderful to just to connect, heart to heart, and not have to worry about, I think a lot of, the LeAnn Rimes that I built up is falling away from me, like that armor, who I thought I had to be, is, it's definitely fallen away, but there's now different layers to it, that the more I bring my true heart, forward. I mean, and trust me, I get, what Brene Brown calls vulnerability hangovers, all the time, because this is not the way I was raised. This is not the way,
Yeah.
I was told, don't have an opinion because people won't buy your music, and, so, man, when that gets in your head at, 11 years old, then, whew, I mean, talk about the unraveling and the undoing.
Wow.
But yeah, but I'm very grateful for this space. I'm grateful for starting this blog and being able to connect with people on a human level, and the people that I found through it. It really has. I honestly, 2 days ago, I was just kind of sat back and admired, and just admired, had so much, gratitude for everyone who shows up for me, and how I have really connected with so many beautiful people. So yeah, I'm grateful
Beautiful.
for it, for sure.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you ever wish this all hadn't happened to you? Do you ever really, like, in a real true way, feel like it would have been better if it hadn't happened?
No,
Cool.
no. I can't even imagine a world without what I have done. Like I said, I try to find meaning in most things. And I do feel like everything that I have experienced has led me to this moment, um, and has allowed me to have access to compassion, and, empathy, and my heart, and a new, in a deep way. It's allowed me to bring, um, I mean, it shows up in my art in new ways, like, I mean, it's just, this whole journey has been, for as painful as it can be at times, um, I find, that it's been beautiful all at the same time. And I think that that's, really, I mean, is there a place that spirituality isn't, I mean, when we talk
No.
about, I think that's what we're really getting to, is
Yeah, it's
like,
just all of it. It's
yeah,
humanness. It's just humanness. It's not hocus pocus. It's just
no.
fleshy in the bones humanness.
Hmm.
This is the sacred container. This is it. It's not up there. You don't transcend it. You don't float away. You don't go to the absolute self and kill the localized self, and kill your story, kill your mind, kill your ego, kill your body. That's dissociation masquerading
Right.
as awakening. I can't experience even what they're talking about except through the sensation and felt experience of my bones and my body anyway. So, yeah, I think
Agreed.
it's just getting here in every regard. That's real spirituality. And because of where we're at as a collective, the power of now doesn't mean much, because most people are still in the power of then. So we got to clear
Right.
enough debris that we can actually clear enough space inside to get present for this life. And
Hmm.
I think that's the focus of my work, and it's the focus of the work you're doing right now.
Yeah.
If you can't move the anger, if your gender conditioning is such where you can't say fuck you, where you can't get inside of your body and hit a foam cube and move legitimate righteous anger, then that means some part of you is hobbled, fragmented, and disconnected. So we have to permission all of it in a healthy, safe, kind, and loving way. And then we get here, and once we're here, well, I said to Al Lowe, and I go, what are they talking about, Al? Spirituality, And he said, oh, spirituality. He goes, you get inside your body, you clear your debris, you experience self-possession, you feel spirited. He said, that's spirituality. And that's how he felt. I look at many of the well-known spiritual teachers, they're flatlined, they're really robotic. I can't feel anything coming off them. I don't want that spirituality. That ain't my version of enlightenment. LeAnn would come in the room, 89 years old, after doing his 300 tantrum kicks every morning on the bed. He was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, full of life, full of feelings, sharp mind, completely present, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I said, yeah, I want a bit of that. That's spirituality. Right.
Well, yeah, and I guess that's interesting because I feel that way when I'm on stage. Like it's my place where I feel like anything that's in me like fully shows up. And I don't. God, I cry on stage. I do everything on stage, and I mean, that's been like the one place, I've always joked if I could sing my life, man, my life would be incredibly beautiful and always expressed. And, I think that's where I've found my real embodiment. It's really kind of been the only place I've found my embodiment has been on stage. And so now it's so wonderful to be finding other ways to bring that into my life, my everyday life. And breath has been such a healer and such a beautiful way to access that. I'm such a believer in breath work, as I know you are too. And I look forward to exploring the body more, even though it scares the shit out of me. Because like we said, we've lived up in my head for so long. The more I come down into it, though, the more grounded I feel, the more present I feel, and to whatever may be arising. I mean, I think that is key. I think without the body, we're missing we're missing it all.
We're not here.
Without the body, we're missing it all.
We're not here.
Yeah.
We're not here. So there's two, I think you're early in grounded spirituality, but there's two exercises. One's called the excavation meditation, and one's called barking dog yoga that I think you might like because they give you
I'll check them out.
Opportunity. Can I read one quote from Grounded that I love reading?
Yes, please.
You okay with that? Okay.
Yeah, I would love it. And then do you mind if we take a couple questions too from people?
No problem at all.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, cool. So I'll just show the book because I'm told that I don't do that enough and I should do it. So this is from The Heart of the Matter. It's a chapter later in the dialogues. I think you're in the journey. The dialogues.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, okay, cool. So the primary cause of our unhappiness is not our thoughts. The monkey mind is not the source of our anxiety. It's a symptom of it. Forget the monkey mind. The mind is not the enemy. Unhealed pain is. Men have been blaming the mind for their neurosis for centuries, while deftly avoiding that which sources its maladies, somatic constrictions, and unprocessed emotions stored in the body itself. It's like losing your keys somewhere in the house and looking for them in the car. Useless, useless, useless. Until we stop blaming the mind and recognize that its neurosis stems from the unresolved emotional and physical body, there will be no liberation. Shifting out of unhappiness is not a cerebral process. That's just another ineffective Band-Aid. It's a visceral, full body experience. It's the monkey heart that's the issue. The state of inner turbulence and agitation that emanates from an uncleared heart. The more repressed your emotional body, the more repetitive your thoughts. Flooded with unhealed emotions and unexpressed truths, the monkey heart jumps from treetop to treetop, emoting without grounding, dancing in its confusion. Often it misinterpreted as a monkey mind, the monkey heart is reflected in repetitive thinking, perpetual anxiety, and negative imaginings, all of which are emanating from the emotional body. In close quote. And in LeAnn's work, the emotional body and the physical body are the same thing. They're functional reflections of each other. So what you're feeling emotionally is somehow stored within and emanating from the body. It may be manifest as mind, a repetitive thought and anxiety, all of that. But really, if you drop down, the story itself is being told somewhere within the physical and emotional body. So that's where we have to do the work, and we got to create a safe enough container to do that so that people don't go there and get re-traumatized because the space isn't safe enough. It
Right.
has to be. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. Let's see if there's any guys. We're gonna open it up for a couple questions. If see if anybody has anything they want to ask. Maybe, maybe not. People are scared. Mm. I know. Someone asked earlier about the mother wound, which I found really interesting. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know you've
Oh my God.
you talked a lot about your mother, and I've
That's another 60-hour talk.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, that was that's definitely a long conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
someone saying so meditation is bullshit.
No, it
That's
depends on what you're doing and why you're doing it. Meditation can be incredibly helpful on all
Mhm,
kinds of levels in your life. For me, it's never been the way to excavate the most relevant and unresolved pieces.
mhm,
Um, but it's, for me, my goal is to get naturally meditative through physical and emotional release. So if I do that fully and completely, at the end of it, I feel meditative. I don't have to sit in a cushion. I become the cushion. Um,
right.
so I think you have to be very conscious. Don't, just because it becomes trendy doesn't mean it's going to serve you. You have to be very careful and selectively attached to the practices you engage in to make sure they're really working for you. You have to try a bunch of things, like
Mhm.
see it as a laboratory and go into the laboratory and try all these things and decide. And meditation absolutely has a place, but it's not the cathartic path that I think many people need right now. I think what people need is catharsis and release of their holdings. So I think we need to go stronger into the somatic models.
Mhm. Um, two things I want to touch on. Someone was just asking about anger. What are your suggestions when of dealing with our anger at this,
I
especially at
think,
this moment in time?
yeah. So I did a little video, which is on Instant Facebook. I have a big foam cube that's part of the bioenergetic world. And you can order these, or you can make them, or you can heat your mattress, but do something to discharge the anger. Get in a room if you can, get down on your knees, get a plastic bat from Walmart for $5 and just start, or use your hands or feet. Tantrum, move it physically, move it out of you physically. Don't make it conceptual, make it actually a somatic experience.
So, is this only when we're feeling anger, or do we like, can we set a certain time to be like, okay, I'm gonna just kind of dig into my anger? Like you were saying earlier, you know, someone was crying, and mimicking the crying to help you then open that piece of you. Is this something where I mean, obviously, if we're feeling the anger, then we can go and allow it, you know, to
Right.
be let out. But then is it something too where we just say, hey, I want to try to dig into this. Do we
Anger
start
time.
just pounding? Yeah, anger time. Like Cameron
Sure,
time, but anger
sure,
time.
sure.
Just go in and start pounding and then just see what comes.
Absolutely. Why
Okay,
not? I mean, it depends how close it is to the surface. For
right.
some people, it's so repressed, shunned, and buried, they have to do really strong somatic practices like bioenergetics or core techniques in order to get the material to start showing up in the body.
Hmm.
Like there's a grounding practice in bioenergetics that's in the book with Michael in part 2. We're just doing grounding alone, feeling energy coming up through the feet in the way that he does it starts to activate grief or anger. I think you often have to open the body, but if it comes to the surface, you want to create a practice in a safe space to inhabit it and to express it. And so foam cube is obviously, it's costing $500, expensive thing to do. Mattressing, anything you can hit in that house without doing damage is
Right.
helpful to move the feelings out of you. This is a terrible time for accumulation of unresolved stuff. Our individual stuff's coming up because we're still and not moving and not being able to discharge naturally without even knowing we're doing it. You have all the collective anxiety. You have this thing called the pandemic, the anatomy of a pandemic, all of those layers of, that's why all these feelings are coming up and you don't even know where they're coming from sometimes. So if people can find a way to cry and rage and move this stuff without hurting anybody, this is the time to do it. So the stuff doesn't congeal and toxify inside of you and make things so much worse for you. Yeah.
Someone just saying pool noodles are great too for
Yeah.
cleansing
Pool
it.
noodles. Pool
Pool
noodles.
noodles are a really good idea. That's a great
Absolutely.
one.
Fantastic.
And then just one other thing, I saw someone touching on just grief. I know that's another big one that's coming up for us at the moment. what are your thoughts on working with grief? Like, is there something, is there one thing that might help people that are really moving through a lot of that at this moment? Any thoughts
You
on
mean
that?
other than creating space for new
Yeah.
habits? Yeah, I mean sometimes it's close, it's in the chest, it's in the body, you can feel it, but you can't get it. So you can lie down on your bed on your back, put pillows or couch pillows underneath you to open up the chest area, to breathe as strongly as you can into the chest area to try to
Okay.
excavate the material, just to bring it to the surface, you know?
Ooh, I love that. I want to try that. Yeah, that seems like a
Yeah.
good one.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's there. It's there. There's so much grief right now. And I get that some of us have to put it all away and just get through our incredibly difficult circumstances. And it's not for me to tell those people you should be releasing.
Right.
But if there's space in your reality to do it, this